Good morning, Ayin Beis, volume 3. We are on top of page 1305. So we learned yesterday, well, just to put it in the context, we're talking about Malchus, the Yoram Kerem Mashiach, Malchus going down into Biyah and connecting it like a corner point with Atzilus, bringing Bitul into the world and elevating it. And that's what Yonason said to Dovid, V'shilashta tered me'ed, that for 3 days you will descend very further down, which is going down to the Birurim of Biyah, to be mahapach them. And the V'shilashta is referring to turning something to a third level. And he says that's the 3 nukudas of Segel. To explain that, he began on page 1304 saying, "V'yisam lizgula mekola amim." When you say that you will be for me a zgula, mekola amim means shal pnei hadama, that from the birurim of the amim, taking what he's going to define now as the midas rois, the fact that there's also there's also chesed and gevurah in the amim, which can be for selfish purposes, like he said, that all the good is for their own purpose, for their own selfish reasons. The whole explanation of chesed and gevurah as they are in le'umazeh, on the other side. A chesed in order to self-aggrandizement, or a chesed for your own benefit, or a chesed where you only give the others crumbs and you keep everything for yourself. And the same thing with gevurah, a form of kamtzonis, of stinginess, and all the different things that he described. And when you transform that through Bitul, that's what he says, that's when you transform into Chesed and Gevurah of Gedusha, which is a flow of kindness, and you give the primary giving, and you keep for yourself the minimal. And it's also in a form of Gevurah, like he said, Gevurah Hashpah, an intensity that comes from Gevurah. That's what we learned. So now that we understand how you transform the midas rois, which he's going to refer to ha'amim, the kol ha'amim shal pnei adama, now he's going to go back and say, and that's what we're going to continue learning now, on line 6 on page 1305, he says, V'zeu nekuda segel. And this is the nekuda, the third nekuda, this is the nekuda, the punctuation mark called segel, which consists of beis nekudas. It consists of 2 dots side by side, v'nekuda tachton, and 1 dot below them. So looks like 2 and a third dot below them. The beis nekudas, the 2 dots, the 2 points, heina midas chesed gevurah. That's the midas of chesed and gevurah. Like we know, chesed is on the right, gevurah is on the left. V'nekuda shetachteim, and the third point of the segel, the lower point, hu b'chinas habitul, is the level of bitul. V'hainu, what is this referring to? The bitul of gedusha. V'hainu habitul le b'chinas ava v'yira levad. Not just a bitul and ava v'yira levad, that you have a bitul of your love and your reverence. Ki b'chinas bitul atzmi, like he said before, a bitul atzmi, that you fundamentally don't sense yourself as an entity here. U'kumaya bitul da'anoches atzmusei. Like he said on the page before, Hakevish es Yitzrei, where a person puts himself aside, the bottom of the last page, puts himself completely aside. It's not just a humble type of love and awe. Fundamental bitl, anochas atzmusei, shayidei zeh, when you have this bitl, what do you achieve? Mishapchim hamidas rois l'toiv. You transform midas rois, bad tendencies, or bad proclivities of chesed and gevurah to goodness. Umasegel nasa skulosa, and from the segel, which consists of these 3 dots, nasa skulosa, this becomes a special feature, the sgula that he talked about, shehi shanekudahi lamaila al gabe beis hanekudas. If I recall correctly, I think he's saying here that even though the nekuda begins with being a bitul that's lower than chesed and gevurah, because the main thing is chesed and gevurah and there's a bitul, it looks like skulasa that the Nakuda now rises to be above the two Nakudas. But I have to look this up because I vaguely remember that in the Segel, there's an upside down Segel. Sometimes you have a Segel that 2 dots and 1 dot below it. Sometimes the Segel is upside down, 2 dots and 1 above. I'm almost sure that that's what it says in some places. And that's
maybe the word segulo. Seguloso.
Yeah, that's probably what he means. So when having the Bitul, let me read inside. So now the Nakuda, remember the Nakuda is Malchus, because that's what creates the Bitul, and now it's the Aliyah that goes up higher than the two Nakudas. The Zeu vayisam lizgula, b'chinas gulosa. You have to look up what that means. And this is that you will be for me a zgula, you'll be for me a unique entity, a special quality. Because the birur of the kol ha'amim, and kol ha'amim is clearly identifying as the birurim of the negative chesed and gevurah. That's selfish, of Yishmael. The chesed of Yishmael and the gevurah of Lumazeh. Nasim b'bchinas zgula. Through the birur, through Malchus going down into biyah, into the amim, and the Bitul transforming biyah, then it elevates it all and it becomes hoysam li zgula, which means that it's like a zgula for the Eibishter. The Eibishter says, you will be for me a zgula. That means it's a very high level than the way that in a sense that elevates even higher than all the levels. I need to do a little more research what zgulasa is in this context, what he means that the Nakuda goes up. Lamayla al gaba beis nakudas. Does he mean does he mean actually is an actual image like that, or is it more figuratively? But regardless, the point is clear. The point is clear that the Segel is referring to these 3 nakudas, is referring to the birur of midas rois, transforming them into something good through Bitul, and thereby everything is elevated to the level of zgula. Now he's going to go back and explain what Yonason said to Dovid. Remember, v'shilashta. He hasn't explained that yet. What does it mean, the 3 days, tated me'oid? So now the next paragraph is going to explain that. I know they broke the paragraphs this way. The truth is it's all one long flow now. So let's continue, unless somebody has anything to ask. The truth is this next paragraph is a direct flow because he's answering the question, or he's explaining what he means by v'shilashta. What did Yonason mean? Let me stop for a moment. Anyone want to ask anything?
I don't remember now, but I think that in Siddur, it doesn't say Segel, but it said Segel. Maybe according to here, Segel is like he's saying here, Sguloso, that in above the 2 things.
I'm going to look
I was
it
just
up.
saying
I
in
don't
his
guess. There are Maimorim. I want to look it up. There's some Maimorim that speak about it. I'll look it up. I'll let you know by tomorrow, hopefully. I don't want to speculate or guess because there's Maimorim that talk about it. So I don't want to just, be a wild guess right now. Okay. I
have a Siddur in front of me now, and it said Segel.
Yeah, but I told you I want to look it up in the Maimorim. This is not a punctuation discussion. It's more of a Chassidish explanation of what Sgulosa means. I don't know if it's just a question of a Segel or Segel. Unless you have a Mocker, and I think it's a Maimorim Chassidus talk about. What do you see in the Siddur that helps us here?
In the Siddur, when you're opening right away by the Nekudas, there's no such thing Segel. Maybe the Chachili, the Nekudas, everything
what
is
difference does it
make?
make? How does that help us here?
It helps because he said V'zeu Nekudas Segel without a vav. And then he's explaining that
What's the difference between Segel?
The difference is that Segel is the Nekuda is above the two things. That's what he said. I don't understand it. Shanekuda ilamailo al gabi based on Nekudas.
You mean the chelam on the vav?
Yeah. You're not going to get Segel, but Segel.
That's my point. This needs to be looked up where he explains it. Here he doesn't explain it. I hear what you're saying.
The Tikkunei Zohar.
That in the beginning.
Anyway, I keep saying the same thing. If you have a Maimer Chassidus where you can quote, great. We're just guessing here. This is pure guesswork. Right now, we need someone, a Maimer that explains this. I'm telling you, there's my modem that explain it. So what's the problem? We will look it up.
Well, for what it's worth, the Tikkunei Zohar seems to explain it. I don't know. I found a pasuk. If you're curious to hear what it says,
you did a Google search.
Yes, I did.
Okay, listen. Why don't you guys trust me? Let me look it up in the Maimarim that I know, and then I'll get back to you. If you have an explanation that's from a Maimer, go ahead. But if you don't, it's just going to be guesswork, really.
No, let's just keep learning.
Okay. Well, since you're ready, tell us what it says at the Kunizayah.
Okay. This is E. Sorry, I just lost the place. E. Margalis Klila Mikol Gavanim Nihirim, the Inyan Nihirim Megarme, Vesgula Delay Dechol Mikudim de Aswan Betame, Bechol Shem Veshem, Mesitzer Becholem E Segulta.
Okay. I don't know if it explains anything.
Yeah. No?
I'd have to look inside. We'll see. Okay.
Yeah, let me tell you. They gave me some.
Let's continue. I'll look it up. I'll get back to you about it.
It's a whatever. It seems to me to be like it's the same thing. It's an Indian of Birur of the Midas Rashos.
Right. Okay.
Right.
And this is what Yonason said to Dovid. V'shilashto tered. The 3 days that you will descend, like he said before, Shezeu Yeridas HaMalchus, Dovid, remember, is the level of Malchus of Atzilus. So is that this, he's referring to the descent of Malchus ad lamata mata, all the way down below, levad kol b'chinas hayesh, that Dovid descends below in order to refine every level of yesh, every state of egocentric consciousness. Ulahafchan lelakus, with the purpose of transforming that to the divine, telekus. Yeah. Just a second. So that's what Yonason is telling Dovid about what the role of Malchus is. And that's what it says afterwards. After it says, V'shalashta tered me'ed, the pasuk continues, V'zeu v'yeshavta etzel even ha'ezel. And you will sit near this particular stone. So he's now going to explain what is this stone. Tehine, because now Dalad Madreg is Datscham. The 4 levels of Daimim Tsameya Chaim Medaber, mineral, vegetable, animal, and man. Heineged Dalad Elam Esabiyah. They correspond to the 4 worlds of Atzilus, Biri, Yitzir, Asiya. Going backwards. Asiya is Daimim, mineral, inanimate. Yitzira is the world of Tsameach, of vegetation, of growth. Bria is Chaya, and Atzilus is Medaber, like the human speaker. Umalchus da Asiya, and the lowest level of Asiya, Malchus of Asiya, Nikra Even. Why does he put Even with a like an acronym? Because like he says in Tanya, it's Aleph Ban, Even. Bechin is Daimim. Even, of course, is an inanimate, is the quintessential level of Daimim, an inanimate entity. So in Asiya, the Lakus is concealed. Like we see that you don't see any vitality in a stone. The Bechinas Daimim, she Bechinas Achrena de Datscham, is the lowest level in Daimim Tzemei Chaim Medaber, and that's the lowest place where Dovid HaMelech descends to. So when he says to him, "V'shalashta tered made," you will descend very downward. The Even HaEzel is the lowest level of them all because it's Asiya of Malchus of Asiya. Who tachlis habirur lamata? That's the ultimate, the utter refinement down below, the birur, the lowest birur possible. Shebezed dafke, the dafke when you go down that low, tolei bias haMashiach b'mheir b'yameinu amen. And that is dependent the coming of Mashiach speedily in our times. Wow. Okay, he's being very, very dense here. But essentially, Yonason is essentially telling Dovid HaMelech the role of Malchus, of Dovid going all the way down to the lowest levels, not just down, all the way down to the lowest levels, what he called before Amim. The birur of Kol Amim Shal Pnei Adama, all the way down to the level of Daimim, because in order to bring the Geula, bring Mashiach, you have to pick it up all the way from the bottom. It's not enough to go down partially. You have to go all the way to the lowest level, and the lowest will become the highest, as he's going to explain. Like we've been learning, that Malchus ultimately transforms the very lowest level to be divine. And this is what we're referring to. Malchus, remember, Malchus is being the level that Malchus is become higher than Zah and higher than Bina, higher than all the levels, because it's not just revealing the divine, it's transforming the lowest level, the very darkness, into light. He's bringing us back to the central theme that we've been learning about Einoid. That's what he's doing right now. Yeah. But the Rebbe Rashab, I have to say, this section is very, very bekitzer. I have no question in my mind that if he would have fleshed it out like he did volume 2 and volume 1, this would be a lot longer hand than it is right now. So I'll try to spell out as much as I can, but I could see from the language that he's including a lot of Eisis HaMachshava here, which means he didn't put everything in writing. There's a lot of thought that lies behind every word here. So I'll try to tie the knots together, but he's very clearly bringing it back to the theme, if you recall, the theme that he began on page much earlier, but he began on page 1298, where he said, we're not just destroying the enemy, Yechata Merivov, but also transforming it. Through tshuva, where Malchus, if you look at page 1299, Malchus is mushrash in the highest levels of Helam Ha'atzmi. So when Dovid goes down into the darkest place, in the fundamental concealment of godliness, he has the power to bring it back to the highest levels of Helam that are beyond structure, even higher than the Oidus and Giluyim. So the descent into the darkest place is actually connecting us to the place that preceded light in the first place, the Helam Ha'atzmi. Just keep that in mind. When you look back in 1299 and much earlier, Einoid, this is the whole theme of volume 3. And that's when he went into V'yarim Kerem Mishiche, not just V'yitan Eiz L'malkei, that he gives strength L'malkei to Zah, that he referred to as Zah. But even further, that Kerem Mishiche, that I'm shocking Mepchinas Malchus, Mepchinas Helam Ha'atzmi, the Ein Sof Mamish. I'm reading from 1299 because it's vital to understand where we are right now. The Rebbe Rashab is clearly connecting it all now. The fact that he brings Toli B'bias Mashiach to me immediately means that he's already thinking about how we transform this existence into the Geula where it will transform all of the lowest levels into the divine energy. So now he qualifies. So all this is hinted to in the Sgula, Segel, the three. So the Bitul comes down below to elevate the Chesed and Gevurah and transform it. And then it elevates to the highest levels. And that's the Evan Ezel. Evan is the Daimon. Okay. So you're saying that you have to go down below to get this level, but he qualifies. What about the days of the Tanoim? In the days of the Mishnah, it says, and even though in the days of Hari Hoy Yesug Delim, they were far greater level than we are. How is it possible that we, going down to the lowest levels in Biyah, all the way to the Evan, the Daimon, Beina Amim, between the nations, and to places where there's the Klippa, the Lu'umaz of Chesed and Gevurah, how does that bring Mashiach? The Tanoim were higher level. So he says, even though the Tanoim Hoy Yesug Delim, and today, Otu Achsher Dora, like the Rebbe would bring often from the Gemara, Achsher Dora Bitniya. Is this a worthy Otu Achsher Dora? Is this a worthy generation? In other words, we are not worthy as they were. We're far lower level than the Tanoim were. Acha Inyan, his answer is, nevertheless, then in the time of the Tanoim, they were the bitter of Elam Abriya. They were elevating, they refined the world of Briya. And the next generation after that, the generation of Talmud, of Gemara, the students of the Tanoim, they did the bitter of Elam HaYetzirah, in the world of Yetzirah. And now, meaning in these later days in Golos, Habirurim hem be'elam ha'asiyah, the Birurim in the lowest world of Asiyah. So it's true they were higher level and they elevated higher levels. But now we are doing the Birurim in Elam ha'asiyah, and who inyan, and that's the inyan of Sukkah's Dovid HaNefeles. What Sukkah's Dovid HaNefeles refers to the Beis Hamikdash, or that the Dovid's Sukkah, David's structure, Nefeles, which means fell and was destroyed. Sheragleo, Yirdes Lamata Mata Be'elam Asiyah. So when something falls, it means there's expression in that's brought from the Psukim, but it's expression used that Ragleo Yirdes Lamata, its legs go all the way down below because it falls down below, all the way down below in Elam Asiyah. So when the sukkah is standing upright, it's in a higher level. When it falls down, it goes all the way down to Elam Asiyah. Ubigmar habirurim, the Elam Asiyah, and when the conclusion of the refinements in this lowest of worlds in Asiyah, then Yeh Bisa Mashiach. When that's finished, that's when Mashiach will come. So even though the Tanoim did refine a certain level, and the Amoraim the next level, but you want Mashiach, you need to go all the way down to the lowest level, and that's when Mashiach will come, the Gemar HaBerurim. It's interesting how we went straight into Mashiach. Okay. Maybe it's fitting to where we are now, the seventh generation, coming to Yud Aleph Nisan.
Can you take a question?
Just a minute. Let me finish just reading this piece here. Let me see. Maybe here I'll stop here one second. Was that in Evan Ezel?
But we needed the Tanoim and Amoraim to reach this level.
Well, you need to first clean up the higher levels, and then you go down to the lowest levels. You need everything. Okay, he's going to explain Evan Ezel now. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. I'll take questions. Fine.
Okay. So my question is, so which comes first, the chicken or the egg? It says, 3 lines above. So what's
the question?
Okay, it depends on B'vias Mashiach. And then it says first you have.
No. It doesn't say it depends. No. It doesn't say it depends on B'vias Mashiach. That so the birur, that Mashiach depends on the birur.
It's the other way around. Okay. But it says Dafka Talui Bevias Mashiach. Isn't that
It doesn't say bibias. He says tole bias, not bibias.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So let's continue. He says, V'zeh inyan Even Ezel. What is the simple interpretation of Even Ezel? Just the name of a stone? Is that a particular location? What's the Even Ezel anyway?
I think the pshat that this is a location, but maybe there are more pirushim.
Yeah. Okay. So now he's going to teach Even Ezel. What's the word Ezel? What does the Ezel mean here? So he says, the Mebchinas Even, he said before, Even is Bchinas Malchus da Asiya, that from this level of Malchus of Asiya, Yiyah, B'Gemara Berurim, Bchinas HaHiluch. He's using now the word Ezel from the word Ozal, to go, to travel. That's what he's saying. Because through the Birur, the Bchinas Even, Bchinas Malchus da Asiya, Yiyah, B'Gemara Berurim, Bchinas HaHiluch. Because when you do the birur on higher levels, you have some movement. But the ultimate movement and the ultimate refinement comes when you go down all the way into Malchus of Asiya. Again, Even Ezel, B'chinas Even, B'chinas Malchus Asiya, that at the end of the refinements, it'll be in a state of movement, a real journey upward. Like we say the expression, from that world which he leaves. So we say when a person leaves the world, azlinan, from the word azlinan means to leave, which means a journey, a traveling. Shahiluch va'aliyah b'yeser hu minei dafke. Hay almad azlinan minei. So it's not just the technical languages from that world which he leaves. It's from that very world that he's able to get into a state of halicha. Let me explain what this means. Chassidus explains it. I don't know if he's going to explain it here. Yeah. So there's expression, Mahalchim Beina Oimdim. The Alter Rebbe has a Maimer in Torah Chanukah that he says the difference between a Shamas and Malachim is when we say Mahalchim Beina Oimdim, that I saw those travelers between those that were standing stationary. So the question is, what are they referring to? It's a vision. He saw the Hilchim, the ones that are moving along, traveling, Beina Oimdim, between those that were standing. So think of, you have a crowd standing in one place, and you see a few people moving through them, moving along. She explains that Malachim, even though they have a very high level of serving God, Malach Machol, Malach Gavriel, Malach Rafal, they serve God. Serafim Emdim Amaloi, you have the Chayas HaKodesh, you have Eifanim, angels that all their whole work is to serve God. But yet they're called the Chassidus Oimdim. Why? Because they can't go out of their own routines. Malach Machol is always going to be Chesed. Malach Gavriel will always be Gevurah. Malach Rafal will always be Tiferes. Because Malachim have their Oimdim. Because Lamaila, because they don't have resistance, they don't have a Yetzer Hara, they don't have any negative thing to overcome, so they don't have to build up any particular momentum and energy. It's only when there's resistance of neshama comes down below and it has to contend with an animal soul and it has to contend with this physical world and all the temptations and all the concealments. Like you said, Aksher Dara, there's no Giluyim. So on one hand, it's a deep darkness, but on the other hand, it catapults us, literally like a springboard, to become a halchim. A neshama lamaila, as much as it's beautiful, learns Torah, doesn't have any resistance, doesn't have anything that should stop it. Whenever there's resistance, it forces us to push harder. It's like when someone pushes back, that's when you have to dig deeper to push harder. So it catapults us to become a halchim, to be in a state of movement, of real movement. So only the Yeridus HaNeshama Lamata, or in the language he's using here, Malchus coming, he said before the Yeridus HaNeshama also. He says when Malchus comes down into the lowest level of the Even, of Daimon, which is Malchus of Asiya, not like the Tanoim Amirayim, which was more involved in Bria Yetzirah, even though they were also here on this. in this darkest place, that creates Even Ezel, Azlinan Minei, that catapults us into a movement of Halicha, where he says, Shahilu v'aliyah b'yesru hu minei dafke. So it's the challenge and the resistance that actually causes far more intensity. It's like a dam. When you build a dam, so the water it's holding back the water, it builds up the water pressure to the point that the water can break through the dam with so much intensity. If there was no resistance, it would never have ever built up such power. So it's dafke lamato here, the darkness that causes and catapults the springboard of Malchus leaping to such a state of hiluch. That's what's hinted to in the word Even Ezel, Azlinon. Again, this is very, very dense and brief. I'm really leaning on, and I'm leaning on my knowledge from other Maimorim to be able to explain this, because he just says the few lines. But when you know the other Maimorim, it becomes very clear what he's discussing here. There's no question the Rebbe Rashab is writing very briefly. The brevity here is pretty unique. I've seen it before in volume 3, but I think not so much to this extent. This page here so far has been a very, very short, compared to other places in Ayin Beis where he elaborates. This is like the last 10 lines could be turned into 2-3 pages at least. Okay, any questions?
Basically, this is a very Rashab is saying.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Basically, this is a Doyer Shvi that the Rabbi is talking about it with Kotzach, that Mashiach is coming now. This is Mamish, this Asias.
Gemar Habirurim, yeah. Correct. That's why I was saying the Kovid Yud Aleph Nissen, maybe, Yes. So, any questions? If not, I'll read on.
He's saying here, Hahiluch ve'aliyah b'yeser hu minei davke.
Yeah. I just explained why. Because the darker it is, the more resistance, the greater the energy that's expended. The Rebbe Rashab says about Yutas Kislev, he says, Shver Zogn, says it's difficult to say this about the Alter Rebbe, but it's on the Alter Rebbe, you could say, the Maimer Chazal, Hazayis Eina Meitzi Shamne Achekechenese. The olive does not produce oil until you press it. That Yutas Kislev being in prison and all the challenges squeezed and pressed the Alter Rebbe that he began producing a low level of oil of Chassidus that he would never have produced had there not been pressure. The Rebbe Rashab, it's difficult to say, he says. Sheshver Zogn, but he says that's what the case is. You see this. I mentioned the Rebbe and the heart attack in 1977. Afterwards, it just caused even a greater. The Rebbe then said to the doctors, what draws the blood when you draw blood? Is it the needle or is it the vacuum? And they said the vacuum. The Rebbe said, exactly. It's the vacuum, the lack of something that causes more intensity. Like it doesn't bring that here, but it's the same verses. I'm interested why he doesn't bring that here. I'm also just wanted to speculate. I was thinking that the Rebbe Rashab, his plan was that ultimately he would flesh this out and turn it into discourses. I want to look up the calendar to see if that year, this would be somewhat in the middle of Ayin Vav. Because remember, the volume 2 ended Vayera Ayin Vav. I want to see if in the next months there was a Shabbos Mocher Chodesh, because that would make sense why he's bringing this in here. Because if you see the Maimorim, they always talk also about timely matters. In other words, had he turned this into a discourse, this could have been the beginning and end of a Maimer on Vayemer LeYenison. So Mocher Chodesh, I was just thinking out loud that maybe that year there was a Mocher Chodesh. I would have guessed. Let's see here. We have here how many pages? 1207. We're now 1305. 100 pages. 100 pages is usually like 10 Maimorim at least, maybe 12 Maimorim. So I would like to see if 12 weeks after Vayera Ayin Vav was a Mocher Chodesh. That would be very interesting. Anyway, you get what I'm saying? Okay, just speculation. Now he's going to continue.
Interesting.
Yeah, because you see how much detail he's going through the psukim. Even though it's negated to the Havana, but he's really doing it strongly in the Haftarah of Yedinson. He's going even further. He's going out to the next pasuk. Remember the 3 arrows now. So then Yedinson continues. So now we've so far explained what the 3 days are, the triple. The Shilashta refers to the Segel going down to the lowest level and bringing Bitul there to elevate it up to Sgulasa. We explained the Evan Ezel is part of that, the Daimim, Malchus of Asiya, of Malchus of Asiya, and the Ezel is Azlina Minei. From that creates a Hiluch. From that itself catapult Dovid to a higher level. Now he continues. The next thing Yonason said to Dovid, V'zeu v'ani shleishes achitzim tzida eira. I will then, when you go down there, I will, after 3 days, I will shoot 3 arrows in the air. This will be a sign. This was a sign for Dovid to know he can come back. So what's the significance of him shooting these 3 arrows? So Dovid went downward 3 days. We understood what that means, to the Birurim and the Bitul. And then Yonason says, I will shoot 3 arrows in the air. What is the significance of that? So he says, so the Rebbe Rashab quotes now from the Arizal. The Isa B'Likutei Torah Arizal, and it says in the Likutei Torah, there's a Likutei Torah from the Alter Rebbe, but the Arizal also has a Likutei Torah on the Parshis, a Pikabola. So what does it say in Likutei Torah of the Arizal? That these 3 arrows refer to the 3 colors. Shazel begins Gimel Gavnei HaKeshes. Keshes can mean an arrow. It could also mean a rainbow, which looks like an arrow, which looks like a bow. That's why it's called Keshes. And the rainbow has 3 colors, 3 primary colors. So the Likutei Torah Arizal says that the 3 arrows Yonason was saying is referring to this, corresponds to the 3 colors of the rainbow. I think the 3 there are, I know rainbow has 5 colors, but I think, or 7 colors, I'm sorry, 7, but I think the main 3 is red. 7. 7, but the 3 main colors I think are red, blue, and yellow. Now I know it says 7, it's definitely 7 detail, but they're generally 3. They're Gimel Gvani Akeshes. It says it a number of places.
These are probably the basics.
Right, the basic colors, yeah. So what is that? V'yadua shahu inyan habirurim. That these 3 colors of the keshes, what's the point of it? Why colors? This is birurim. Let me explain what it says in Chassidus about it. He's going to bring a Zoyar to make the point. Generally speaking, when you talk about a flame, let's say, it says the flame has several colors. The closest to the wick is the darkest part. You see, it's very dark blue, called sometimes Nuhura Shchera. Then that's almost like black. Then there's a part Nuhura Tichla that's blue. Then there's Nuhura Chivra that's white. And then there's Nuhura, how do you say red in Aramaic? Adema? There's another word. There's Tichla, Shchera, Nehera, Tichla, Chivra. Shchera, Tichla.
Tichla is tcheles, mistame.
Yeah, Tichla is blue, that's for sure. Tichla is bluish. Okay, so it says in Chassidus,
so you said Uchmo, Tichlo, and Chivro?
Uchmo is dark. Uchmo is dark. Tichlo is bluish, and Chivra is white. I think there's one more, maybe Adema, reddish.
You're talking about Gimel.
I know. No, but let me explain what I want to say. White light generally is seen as being the purest. Like the prism that bends light, like in a rainbow, that's already called, the light is going through different, it's bending the light waves. That's called birurim, because you have to refine something. When it's white light, it's pure. It's like levana elyon, it's pure. When the white light goes into colors, colors means it's already going into a world that needs refinement. That's generally the explanation why he's saying that it's the world of birurim. There's the union of birurim. But he's going to bring a zoya that explains it. He says, Daf Ayin Beis Amid Beis. So Noach is where the Keshes. The first time we hear about a rainbow is after the flood. So Noach, he says like this: do not wait to see the feet of Mashiach, meaning Mashiach's arrival. Ragla Mashiach means like Ikfis Mashiach, Ragla meaning Mashiach, the legs of Mashiach arriving. Don't wait to see that. Until you'll see a rainbow that will shine the Gavne Nehirim with the bright colors, and will illuminate the world. In other words, Mashiach will come after a rainbow. That's what the Zohar says. But it's pretty strong words. It says, do not wait for Mashiach until you see a keshes in the world that shines in beautiful, bright colors and illuminates the world. What does that mean? Why is that the case? Why is Mashiach dependent on the rainbow? So he's going to explain, because the rainbow is birurim. And we said before, Mashiach needs the birurim is what catapults the world and transforms it into Mashiach. V'hainu shabirurim ub'chinas hamalchus yeiru b'chinas er atzmi. What the Zohar is saying is because the keshes represents not a gilui air from higher worlds, that the world itself, that the very world itself will shine. The birurim and malchus, which is the lowest levels, they themselves will shine with a core fundamental ir atzmi that's higher than regular light, more than sunlight and more than other forms of light. That's what the keshes represents. Remember, the keshes came after the mabul. The mabul was a result of what? Of a world that was mole oretz shachas. The world was filled with the corruption. And God cleansed the world with the mabul, and the keshes was a result of God's covenant, his bris, that he would no longer ever destroy the world, because the keshes represents that the world became refined. So this refinement is what he's saying is with the ir atzmi that shines. That's why the keshes is not just a regular light. It's a beautiful light that comes from the transformation of this material world. And the fact, that's what the keshes represent. One second. And the fact is, the colors of the rainbow are a result not of just pure white light, but light that is bent by the water drops. A rainbow, why does a rainbow happen after the rain? Because the rain creates a certain type of prism that when we see it in the sky, it bends the light. It's like when you look at light through a drop of water, you can see colors. That's what it comes down to. So it's coming from the refinement of this material world. That's what he's saying in the Zohar, the Keshes. Chassidus explains it in other places at length. Again, he's being very brief, but that's what he's saying. So this is the Ir Atzmi of the Keshes, and this is what Yonason was hinting to when he said, I will shoot 3 arrows. He's referring to this, the birurim, the light that comes out of the birurim. I know this is new stuff and we got to digest it, but
He's
let me
not
go.
talking there about Gimel Gvonei Keshes in Zohar. He's only talking about Keshes, not Gimel Gvonim.
And Nachanami, but when you learn Chassidus, it explains it. He says begavne nehirin. He does say begavne. Plural.
Visnar le'alma means it'll shine above.
No, it means
illuminate the world.
It will illuminate the world.
Yeah. Got it.
It'll shine into the world. I think we'll stop here because the next piece is going to further explain this idea of the rainbow. But I don't want to rush it. And the next piece needs a little more. He's going to connect it all. Wow. He's going to connect it all to Malchus, to Keren, to the other three interpretations in Keren. Remember, Keren doesn't just mean a corner point. It also meant the etzem. It also meant light. He's going to connect it all to V'yaram Keren Mashiach. That's why he's bringing Mashiach here. It's all coming back together. Okay, pretty cool.
Reb Simon,
yeah,
this is amazing that we are learning it now. Yud Aleph Nissen. That's the tachlis. We know what the Rebbe spoke about it, and maybe al derech hatzachus gimel dvonei hakeshes. It started by the Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe. It's hatzachus.
Okay, maybe, yeah. You say Heid, you say then Malchus. Yeah, you could say that. But I see he's going to bring it all together here and going to conclude this piece on top of next page, 1306. But I don't want to rush it. There's going to be more now about Keshes. He's going to bring it back to Keren Mashiach, the other interpretations, and all about elevating Malchus, Einoid, that it itself should shine, that the world itself will shine, not just with a Gili air from above, Havayu Elakim, but Einoid, that the Cheshek itself, the darkness itself, will lead to tremendous light. I think the Keshes is a good example of that, the rainbow, yeah. That explains why the rainbow. I mean, God didn't use sunlight or even moonlight. He used the rainbow to be the sign that he would not, that the world has been refined and that he would not, yeah, Keshes is a form of refinement. Okay, we'll stop here. We're halfway down page 1305. Any questions?
He's talking here about Tanoim and Amoiroim, but he said that the Tachlis Mashiach is coming from the Yerida Achik Deilo. So we could see the doggage that the Rabbi is making about going out to the whole entire world, Shlichas. Tanoim Amoiroim is amazing, but the Mashiach is coming from Lemato Mato B'Yesa, reaching the whole entire world.
Yeah. Correct. That's a good point. There's a mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek. The Rebbe chazed it a lot, many times. If I recall correctly, he goes through all these details in much more elaborate form. I want to look it up there too. A long mimer in Eira Teira.
And also we know the Rabbi is Malchus. That Malchus is creating the whole entire thing.
Yeah, Ayin Yove Ezri, Mir Aleph Nissen Yove Ezri, right? Ayin of Malchus. You know the diuk, Ayin is Mem Yud Aleph Yud Num, Yud Aleph Nissen.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
The Ayin of Malchus, Keren. Keren is 2,350. Okay, so we'll stop here, middle of 1305. Remember, everyone, I'm doing tonight a talk in Manhattan. You put up the link, right? I think you put it up. Yes,
I did. Yes, I did. 7:30 p.m.
Yeah, that's when I think it begins. Yeah.
Do you know when you personally are going on?
I don't know the exact schedule. They didn't give it to me yet. I'm not sure.
You're going to be sitting with Senator Joe Lieberman. Have you met him before?
Yeah, well, yeah, I know him. We know each other. I've been with him Pesach 1 year. We're friendly.
Pretty cool. Hatzlacha Rabbah. We're looking forward to hearing you speak.
Thank you. So I'm middle of 13.